So today we're going to talk about attribute-based signatures with advanced delegation and tracing. So you have all seen this. The layout of this presentation is pretty simple. First, I'm going to introduce you to attribute-based signatures, or ABS for short, and then we'll talk about two different features of ABS, which are tracing and delegation, and we'll show how we can combine both of them in a unique solution, which combines the advantages of both. All right, so let's get started. But first, I would like to make a small reminder for everyone of traditional digital signature scheme, where Alice generates a secret key and a public key for signing. And now Alice can use her signing key or secret key to sign any message. And if Victor wants to verify the validity of the signatures, then he uses Alice's public key and verifies the signature. Now, if Alice and Victor are both members of some sort of organization, then usually there is a PKI, and an authority who is in charge of generating the keys and distributing them accordingly to Alice and Victor, depending on their role. So in this scheme, we have two most important agents, which are Alice as a signer and the authority as like the security manager of the whole setting. And naturally, they both have different needs that may be conflicting. So on Alice's part, what Alice needs to do is to sign any message that she has to sign without restriction. When doing so, especially if there are lots of different verifiers, she might expose her identity to a lot of different people. So this is something she rather would like to avoid. And finally, if Alice holds responsibilities, because if, for example, she's managing different teams with different projects at the same time, then she might have a lot of different signing rights that she needs to manage. And if, for example, she wants to delegate these rights to different people, like if she wants to take an assistant, then she needs to delegate these rights in a secure manner. On the other side, for the authority, the needs of the authority are mainly to supervise the security of the whole scheme with two things. One part, applying the rules of the service, of the signing service, and the second part, by being compliant with mandatory law and regulations like Know Your Customer or anti-money laundering. And so what we're going to show today is that attribute-based signatures with both delegation and tracing can meet all of these different needs at the same time. All right, so now, finally, attribute-based signatures, what are they? So we're in a setting very similar to the ones that we've seen before. Except this time, when the authority generates secret keys for Alice, these keys are associated with what we call attributes. That might depend, for example, on the role of Alice when she receives these keys. So here, Alice should probably be an executive in the HR department and the IT department. And now, when Alice wants to sign a message, she can do just as she did before. She can sign the message, but on top of that, she can commit to a policy which is fulfilled by the attributes that she has in her secret keys. This makes it so that when Victor wants to verify the validity of the signature, not only is he convinced that the message is properly signed, but on top of that, he's also convinced that the policy holds at a cryptographic level. So here, Victor is convinced that the signer of the message is indeed an executive in the HR department. So the first good thing about attribute-based signatures is that, as regard to the first need of Alice, it is a direct solution for that, because Alice, given a good set of attributes distributed to her, she can sign like whatever she wants to sign with any given policy, and yeah, so it's very flexible. So now we can go and look at our second check mark of maintaining Alice's privacy when she signs. So in this setting, we just imagine that Victor verified a signature. And naturally, Victor might be tempted to ask who signed this message. So it is something we want to avoid, as the policy should be the convincing aspect of the signature and not the identity of the signer. That is the whole point of the attribute-based signatures. So what we want is that the identity of the real signer is hidden among the identities of all potential signers of the signature. So I won't dwell on much details on that, about how we can ensure anonymity, because most state-of-the-art ABS are anonymous. This is a very standard thing for ABS to be anonymous. And so what we'll do is just leverage state-of-the-art ABS techniques to grant anonymity to our scheme, which makes it so we can check our second need. But now you might be wondering if there is a problem. And that is because we have a second agent in the scheme in the form of the authority. And the needs of the authority to be compliant and to apply the rules of the service are intrinsically linked to knowing the identity of the signer of a message. So there is a tension here that makes us wonder if these two different properties, these two different needs, are actually compatible. To answer this question, we are going to look at our first feature, which is called tracing. So in a tracing setting, we just assume that Alice already signed some message and with whatever policy she wants to sign with. And what the authority can do is it can designate what we call a tracer, and this tracer has a unique ability to look inside any given signature and to extract in a provable way the identity of the signer. Then this identity can be shown along with a proof of extraction to like any third-party regulator that can then do whatever compliance or law regulation thing it needs to do. But now the important point is that the authority is indeed compliant. Since the tracer is designated by the authority, it cannot be all other agents, all other verifiers who can find the identity of Alice, so we maintain the anonymity, the privacy of Alice when signing. However, so we can manage both of these different properties at once. However, we have a small diminution of the anonymity, which could be perfect, meaning Alice didn't put any information about her identity in the signature. But now Alice must put a small part of her identity in the signature. And this is something that the tracer extracts with a trapdoor, which degrades the anonymity granted by the scheme to a computational level instead of a perfect level. But if we accept this trade-off, then we can consider that we meet those different needs at the same time. So now, the last thing we need to do is to ensure that Alice can manage and delegate her rights in a way that's appropriate. And yes, so the question is, can we check this? It's written right here. Naturally, to do that, we're going to introduce our second feature, which is called delegation. But first, let us give a little bit of motivation. Now, let's suppose that Alice is in a company or organization, so naturally she's working on her laptop. Her laptop can access her Git, and it can also probably access her emails, but Alice probably has like other devices. Maybe she has a phone, for example, and her phone should probably access her emails, but maybe her phone shouldn't be able to access her GitHub. Because, well, two things. First, she doesn't code on her phone, so like principle of least privilege, she shouldn't have access to it. Plus, her phone is more likely to get stolen when she goes to like a conference or during travel. So this is something like she considers she should set a higher level of restriction or a lesser level of rights for a phone. If we want to take the example a bit further, we might consider that Alice can also manage like a wireless printer with a phone. And like obviously, her phone has no need to access neither her emails nor her GitHub. So what this simple example shows here is that, in general, using the same keys under the same rights for different uses is at least dangerous, or is either like dangerous or not suitable. So this is something we would want to avoid. So the natural answer should be Alice must just refer to an authority every time she needs a new key. Like each new write infers a new key, so Alice goes and asks new keys to the authority. The problem with that is it incurs communication between Alice and the authority, which may be numerous and like regular if Alice has like different applications, different devices, in this case like different teams, different projects. But the second problem on a deeper level is that it just reduces Alice's autonomy, because if you think about it, Alice is actually able to use all of her devices, but what she's unable to do is to restrict herself or restrict the rights of her own devices, which is something that she should be able to do. Like if she can do more, she should be able to do less. But in this case, like in the regular case, she's not able to do that. So to solve this problem, we have a tool that we call delegation. And in ABS, delegation is pretty simple. What you do is you take your set of attributes in your keys, and you just create a subset of attributes from these keys. And you can do so recursively to create an entire infrastructure of rights, which then like can match whatever you need in terms of signing rights. And so this delegation in general is very useful when you need to manage different teams who are working on different projects, and or as in the example we've seen before, if you have different devices working together at the same time. Sorry. The problem with delegation is that it doesn't quite solve the rights management problem we have, or at least the delegation as we've introduced here does, which is a usual way of doing delegation. So let's take an example. Let's suppose that Alice wants to take an assistant in the form of Bob, and so she needs Bob to manage like the IT department. So she says, all right, Bob, I'm going to give you my IT department attribute and my HR department attribute, because like maybe you need to hire people or manage people or do whatever things with other people. So you need these two attributes. But no, Bob, but I keep like the executive for myself because it's too high level. But no, Bob tells Alice, I'm sorry, Alice, I can't sign IT decisions because our suppliers do not recognize the signatures I'm making on your account, because I'm not an executive, so I do not have a high access level to sign. So Alice is a bit stuck here, so she says, all right, you know what, Bob, you've been here for 10 years, I'm going to trust you on this one. I'm going to give you my executive attribute, but please only use it for the IT decisions that you need to do. Do not do anything funny with the HR department attribute together that you might do this, like non-standard things with it. And Bob is like, of course, Alice, you know me, you can trust me. And obviously he goes on to put his little attacker's horn. And he signs himself a 1 billion raise, and he signs it with the attributes that Alice asked him not to use together. He could also fire Alice, by the way. So this is a valid signature. It's just as if Alice signed it herself, actually. And what we see here is that the problem with the traditional way of doing delegation is that you can delegate the attributes that you have, but you cannot compel the policy which you want to see in the delegated key. So to solve this problem, what we might want to do is give a look at the existing literature. So we can either go back to the very original solutions of ABS from Okamoto and Takashima. The problem is that they have neither delegation nor tracing, so we can't really do anything with it. So we go a bit further, and we go to the full path delegation from Garland and Manulis. And this solution is actually very interesting because it has a very strong property for tracing. It allows the tracer to find the full history of delegation of the key that has signed any given signature. So it is very powerful from a compliance level. However, if we look at the delegation properties, the problem is that it only supports attribute delegation, which, as we've seen before, may not be suited for all kinds of delegation. Furthermore, in terms of signature size, the size of the signature also scale with the history of the delegation of the key, which might make quite big signatures depending on the use case. So we really don't have any solution in this setting, and this is what we are going to solve. To do that, what we do, our contribution is to propose a new mode of delegation, which is called delegation of policy. Delegation of policy works as follows. If Alice wants to delegate a policy, what she can do is choose any predefined policy that she wants to delegate and lock it into a policy key, which is this sort of rectangle that you see over here. And now this policy key can be completed with any message that needs to be signed, but the policy is restricted here, so only future messages can be changed for signing. So this new policy key can be safely distributed to Bob, and Alice needs not fear that Bob is going to abuse it by using different policies that she wouldn't expect Bob to use, even though she can still give to Bob powerful attributes like the executive one. Sorry. All right, so I'm going to give a few insights about delegation of policy, what you need to do it, or what challenges we had to design it in our scheme. So the simple idea is to notice that any ABS signature is actually just the fusion of a message commitment and a policy commitment. So the natural solution for creating delegation of policy is to separate both of these commitments in two different parts. The policy commitment can be chosen by Alice at delegation time, and then the message commitment can be chosen by Bob at signing time. And naturally, the technical problems arise at this part here, which is how do we separate both of these commitments. So I'm going to give a small slides of technical insights on how we did that at a very high level. If we consider the original signing scheme from which we inspired by Okamoto and Takashima, what happened is that you commit to a signature on both the message and the policy at the same time by calling a hash function on it. And to to prove the security of the scheme, you need to exploit the orthogonality of a two-dimensional vector, of which the commitment is in one of the subspace. So yeah, to prove the security, you need to exploit the orthogonality of this two-dimensional vector. And what Okamoto and Takashima did is they proved a technique called indexing in 2 dimensions that allows them then to prove security, as I said. So naturally, for what we want to do, the way to solve the problem is obviously to split the commitment in two. So you separate the commitment of the message and the commitment of the policy. But now, when you want to prove security, you have a problem because your 2-dimensional vector is 3-dimensional. So you cannot use the original indexing technique that has been devised before. And so what we did is that we proved that the indexing technique can be pushed to a higher dimension, to the 3 dimension, and which then in turn allows us to prove security. So I won't go into more details for the technicals here. So the good news is we are done with our last checkmark. As we showed how we can take the original attribute delegation and make a new kind of delegation, which is more, let's say, suitable, maybe not secure in some cases, but suitable in general. And so we are good. With this shows that we can take all the different needs from Alice on one side and the authority on the other side. And thanks to ABS with both delegation and tracing, we can make a single scheme which meets all of their needs. So let's just conclude by looking at the big picture of what we've seen here today. If I go from the beginning, I have an authority which generates secret keys associated with attributes. And this secret key is then distributed to Alice. Now, if Alice wants to delegate some work to Bob, she can use either the traditional delegation of attributes with possibly some of the risks that we've seen. And she can also use the delegation of policies that we've introduced. Either way, both of these delegated keys can be used to produce valid signatures, which are then verified by Victor, which is convinced that the policy is indeed true. To ensure compliance, the authority can designate a tracer, and the tracer is able to extract the identity of Alice and show it to any third-party regulator. So if we put our situation in the context of the other solutions that we've seen, that we've introduced, what we're good at is delegation, as we now have two forms of delegations that can be used together, which is pretty nice for our use case. However, we are a bit weaker on the tracing side because now our solution can only trace back to the first delegator of a chain of delegation. So this is a trade-off that also comes with the fact, the possibility to come back to a linear size of the signature, only in the size of the policy and not in the full delegation history. I think we are good here. So thank you for assisting for my presentation. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask.
Thank you for the presentation. So maybe it's not exactly clear on your last scheme. When you produce a signature using either the delegation via attribute or via policy, can it be distinguished where it's coming from, either by the tracer or just by the generic user?
No, all the signatures are perfectly indistinguishable. So whether it is coming from regular delegation or policy delegation is the same. And in particular, you can't even notice, because what I've not detailed here is that technically you can use a chain of regular attribute delegation, and then you have the right to like only one policy delegation, because once you do a policy delegation, you're not really able to delegate a new key in a way that's convincing. And this cannot be noticed either. If you do like 10 normal attribute delegation and then a policy delegation, the distribution of the signatures are the same as if you just did like a policy delegation from the very beginning.
I think you just covered this, but if you're delegated a policy, can you then delegate?
It depends on your definition of delegation, but I would say you can only trivially delegate.
So you just give your key?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
And the tracing, does it come back to the policy or does it come back to the person who gave the policy?
Yeah, it comes back to the identity of the original delegator, of the very first delegator in the chain of delegation.
Cool, thanks.
So with regards to that, I don't want to downplay my own contributions, but like the Gardam and Manuelis scheme for the full history of delegation is, like for compliance level, it is very, very strong. Okay. So the problem is that the size of the signatures becomes bigger, but you really have a full access from any given signature of entirely what happened in this chain of delegation.
Does your construction kind of like extend theirs? Is that?
No, I'm just talking like from a feature concept. If you want more tracing, that is better. So thank you for your questions.
I'm going to talk about our work, lattice-based threshold, accountable and private signature. This is a joint work with Yongjun, Wen, and Baocang. So let's talk about the threshold signature. In a threshold signature, the key is distributed among all the participants. So there, in a Tn threshold signature, there are n participants and one optional combiner. The final signature is generated by at least T signers. So in this figure, we have 5 participants and the threshold is 2. So at least 2 signers use their key shares to generate the partial signatures. for example, sigma 4 and 5. So the combiner is to combine all the partial signatures and output the final signature. We say a threshold signature is private if the final signature does not reveal the signer's identities. For example, it does not reveal the identity 4 and 5. Okay, now I'm gonna talk about two types of threshold signatures. In a private threshold signature, the signature reveals nothing about the quorum of signers and the threshold T. This could be used to hide the inner works of an organization. The organization shields the threshold T from the public, this preventing disclosure of the number of machines. So an attacker must compromise to forge a signature. While in an accountable threshold signature, we call ATS in short, the signature reveals the identity of all the signers. Usually there's a third party called a tracer to trace the contributed signers. This could be used in tracing fraudulent transactions. For example, 2 out of 5 bank managers are required to authorize a banking transfer. The signature on a fraudulent transfer would pinpoint the 2 bank managers who authorized it. While in practical scenarios, sometimes we require both privacy and accountability. For example, in digital assignment of an organization, this organization keeps the tracing key to trace the so that the threshold and the signers remain private in the transactions, but the trustees are accountable in case of a fraudulent transfer. Also in web server TLS, the web server relies on the T machines to complete the TLS. When the server secret key is compromised, the server could trace the fraud servers. Okay, so consider the practical scenarios. Bonney and Komlo proposed the primitive threshold accountable and private signature called TAPS in Crypto22. In such a system, we have n participants, 1 tracer and 1 combiner. The final signature is generated by at least T anonymous signers. Also, we have a tracer to trace the contributed signers. So let's use this figure again. If the final signature does not reveal the signer's identity 4 and 5, as well as the threshold T, which equals 2, so the signature is private. And we have a tracer. She could use the secret tracing key to trace contributed signers. So in this system, she could output 4 and 5. In BK22, the authors propose very efficient taps from discrete log, but we could say constructing taps from discrete log or pairing is not sufficient. For example, in March 2022, MIT Technology Review reported a news titled "Facing Tomorrow's Quantum Hackers Today." It shows strong concern of quantum computers and a desire to design post-quantum cryptography. Earlier in 2016, NIST announced to collect post-quantum standards from around the world, and in 2022, they announced 3 standards from lattice-based cryptography, including 1 CAM called Kyber and 2 signatures called Delism and Falcon. And later in August 2023, Google Chrome announced to use the post-quantum encryption. Post-quantum encryption called Kyber. It shows that lattice-based schemes or protocols are becoming increasingly important in practical world. Okay, so in this work, we focus on lattice-based taps. Let's start on the definition. A taps includes 5 algorithms: key, sign, combine, verify, and trace. So in the keygene, it takes the public parameters and output the public keys and the secret keys for the signers, the combiners, and the combiner and the tracer. To generate the partial signatures, the participants run the sign algorithm with their key shares. In this process, the signers could interact with each other or with the combiner. Okay, receiving the partial signatures, the combiner uses his secret combining key to combine the partial signatures. And after output the final signature, the public could run the verify algorithm to verify it. If necessary, the tracer could run the trace algorithm with her secret tracing key to find the contributed signers. Okay, let's recall the generic construction in BK22. We need to emphasize that in the signing algorithm, it's not possible to hide the signer's identity as well as the threshold T, because one could simply count the number of the partial signatures. So the core of the steps is to design the combine algorithm. So in the combine algorithm, we want to hide the signer's identity, which is the set S, and the threshold T. Also, we want to give the hint for the tracing algorithm. So the final signature in the combine algorithm consists of 3 parts: a ciphertext, a proof pi, and a signature tag. The ciphertext is a public key encryption of an ATS signature, and the proof pi is the zero knowledge proof of the ATS signature. It shows the signature is valid on the message M. And the signature tag is the combiner's signature on the message, the ciphertext, and the proof pi. This is used to connect all the things. Okay, from this generic construction, we could see that we need 4 building blocks: a public key encryption, an ATS signature, a zero knowledge proof, and a digital signature. So following the generic construction, we apply these building blocks. For the public key encryption, we use the dual rigor of encryption, which is the original version of the CryptoCabber. As for the ATS signature, there's no current construction from lattice. And the zero knowledge proof, we apply a generic paradigm that supports cogitate relations. Also, we need a lattice-based digital signature. So in this work, we mainly do 2 things. First, we propose a Fishami with a bot-type ATS signature from lattice assumptions. And we instantiate the zero knowledge proof to adapt our proofs. So let me first introduce 2 lattice-based assumptions. We use the modular cis assumption to build our lattice-based ATS, and our instantiated zero knowledge proof relies on 2 assumptions: modular cis and modular LWE. The modular cis problem looks like in this figure. The matrix A is a matrix and X is a long vector with short norm. So in detail, given a matrix A from a polynomial ring, we want to find a short solution X such that AX equals 0 and X has small norm. Well, the modular LWE problem is to distinguish the given samples between those 2 distributions. The first distribution looks like in this figure. S and E are short vectors, and the second distribution, A and B, comes from the uniform distribution. Okay, so now we want to introduce a lattice-based signature from modular cis problem. We would like to use this signature to construct our partial signatures in the sign algorithm. This signature applies Fishami with a bot paradigm. Namely, it uses Fishami paradigm and the rejection sampling. So the public key of the signature is the modular sys instance, and the corresponding secret key is the short solution. To sign a message, the signer chooses a randomness from a small norm distribution R and computes W equals AY and sends it out. The verifier is supposed to sample a challenge from some challenge space, while in the Fiersham-Meal paradigm, it's replaced by a random oracle. So the both two-party computes the hash value of W and M, and to obtain the challenge value C. Then the signer computes Z equals XC and Y. But we need to emphasize that here as Y from a small norm distribution, so Z is not uniform from the polynomial ring. In this way, Z will leak the distribution of X, so we need to apply rejection sampling. So, I'm very sorry. Okay, so to verify the signature, the verifier is to check the two conditions. The first one comes from the modular sys instance, and the second is because X, Y, C, and small. Okay, now we want to apply this signature to generate our partial signature. In detail, each signer uses this signature, generates their partial signature. So the combiner here plays the role of the verifier. It collects all the partial signatures and generates the challenge for the signers. Here, the public key are the n instance of the modular sys problem, and the secret key are the corresponding solutions. Here, the combiner sums up all the W and Z and generates the hash value of C for each signer. Finally, it outputs the signature sigma equals ZWS, where S is the set of the signer's identity. But we need to note that if the abort happens here, sending the WI here directly is insecure, because an adversary could know the distribution of the secret X in this way. So we want to replace the WI by the commitment. This is the modified protocol. The signer samples a randomness R and outputs the commitment. Then the combiner sums up all the commitment. And the signer computes Z as before. If there's no abort happens, he could output the RI to open the commitment. Okay, so now we discuss how to verify the signature, as all X, Y, C comes from the small distribution, and each ZS satisfies the modular LWE instance, so we can combine the W and Z to obtain the two conditions. Okay, so now we discuss how to construct taps from the ATS signature. Recall that an ATS signature ensures the accountability. We focus on the privacy this time. The ATS combined signature output to the sigma equals ZWS, but we cannot send in the signature directly because the set S will break the privacy. It reveals the signer's identity as well as the threshold T. So we mainly follow the generic construction but modify some details. For the ciphertext, we instead encrypt the signer's identity S. And the zero-knowledge proof, we prove that the ATS signature is valid. That is, the ZW satisfies the verification conditions, and S satisfies the threshold. For the combiner signature, we follow the generic construction. Okay, let's discuss the cipher test. So to encrypt the signer's quorum, we first convert the set S into a length n binary vector. This represents the n participants. So if the participant I is a signer, the Vi equals 1, and otherwise Vi equals 0. Okay, to get the cipher test, we first extract such a vector from the set S, and we encrypt the cipher test. We encrypt the vector V by the dual rigor of encryption. And at last, we prove that the cipher test can be decrypted. The last two steps can be replaced by a verifiable encryption, as we do in our work. Next, we're gonna prove the ATS signature is valid. Let's recall the verification condition. If Z is small and AZ equals this equation, then the signature is valid. So we want to prove the conditions are satisfied. First, we keep the vectors from the cipher test. And then we replace the set S by the vector V. So we obtain this AZ equation. Also, we want to make sure that the cipher test is the threshold is satisfied. So we want to prove the 2 norm of the vector V equals T. Also, we want to make sure the threshold is hidden. Here, because the threshold T is not used everywhere, so we use a symmetric encryption to make sure the efficiency. So our final type signature looks like this. It consists of the cipher test, the proof, and the signature tag, which is the signature of M cipher test and the proof pi. To verify this signature, we could simply verify the proof pi and the signature tag. And if we want to trace the signature, we could just use the secret key to decrypt the vector V. Okay, now let me introduce a T out of N threshold proof. In the type signature, we have proved that the signature is contributed by T signers and without revealing the identities. So this proof can be extracted and simplified to a threshold proof. So our statement are the N instance of MC's problem, and the corresponding witness is T short solutions of those N instances. And the corresponding relation looks like this. Okay, we also provide the parameters and signature size to ensure 128-bit security. This is determined by the modulo CIS and the modulo LWE problem, reduced by each primitives. Also, we give the signature size in this table for different threshold T and the participants number N. For the large number N, the signature size grows linearly as N increases. When N is smaller than the degree of polynomials, which is 128 in our work, it does not change much. Also, we give a comparison with related works. Our signature size is linear in the participant number N, which is theoretically optimal. In practical, our signature size is comparable with lattice-based group signatures. So now we conclude our work. We mainly follow the generic construction and give a lattice-based taps from Fishman with a bot paradigm. The underlying zero-knowledge proof leads to a lattice-based threshold proof. And we also give the recommended parameters and practical signature size. For the future work, we recommended applying Boolean proof or ZK stacks to achieve shorter proof size. Also, we suggest exploring stronger security and more expressive functionalities. Okay, to apply our work in the next week, we hope the audience could clarify the concepts of taps within your own organization. And in the first 3 months, the following of this presentation, we hope you could understand how to construct a lattice-based tap signature and clear all the details of zero-knowledge proofs. And later in 6 months, we hope you could design more applications and by using our construction ideas. Okay, thank you. I'm very sorry for the slides. Do you have any questions?
Hello, thanks for the presentation.
Yeah.
Have you tried using your new taps with lattice for different constructions, or are there different type of constructions where you can insert the taps, or for the moment is it only for this sort of primitive?
I didn't catch it. So for this primitive or for our technique?
No, I mean, like, have you thought about other applications of what you developed here?
Other application. We didn't explore much. Okay. I think this is the end of my presentation, and thank you for listening.